Hey, psych, Haaris here. I'm not talking to you right now, but you're watching a video of me talking to a camera that's going to be playing a video that will make it look like I'm talking to you. But what is a video camera? There are many names associated with the beginning of the film camera. One of them is Louis Le Prince, who invented his own 16-lens camera in 1887 featuring an electromagnetic shutter. William Dickson is another inventor who, under the employment of Thomas Edison, would go on to design a kinetographic camera in 1891. He also helped to pioneer the illusion of movement through quick successions of pictures. The Lumiere brothers were another set of impactful names in the film industry and worked as proponents for the commercialization of films and cameras. All of these people worked together to found the beginning of the film industry, and you'll notice one thing in common about all these forerunners in film. They're all male. Gender roles are defined by our psychology textbook as the general patterns of appearance and behavior associated with being male or female. Don't get this definition confused with gender schemas, though, which are generalizations about what toys and activities are appropriate for boys versus girls, and what jobs are meant for men versus women.
As was common in the pre-21st century, women were put into menial and nurturing roles in society. They were secretaries, maids, garment workers, and farmers, among other things. They were all given jobs destined to gain low income and remain at low income with small chance to proceed further in the job chain. The film industry is no different. Men in this misogynistic society were naturally at the top. They were the breadwinners, and their gender roles determined that they were to be at the top of the food chain. Women had no place in their plan for the beginning of film. Women couldn't afford cameras and couldn't gain the proper respect within the industry to establish themselves as people with creative vision.
There was one person who broke through this barrier very early in the game. Her name was Alice Guy Blaché, and she made her first film titled The Fairy of the Cabbages in 1895, depicting a European fairy tale about the birth of boys from cabbages and girls from roses. The beginning of narrative film had sexism in it. From the start, boys were not to be born from roses, and girls were not to be born from cabbages. The babies were born directly into their roles in society.
And so, commercialized film began. Hollywood conventions grew stronger throughout the film world, and women were given the option of being scriptwriters, costume designers, makeup artists, and other behind-the-scenes roles. The Hays Code was a set of moral guidelines that were given to filmmakers which listed topics to avoid and topics to take caution around, such as abortions and birth control. Dorothy Arzner was the only female director to successfully hold her own rebellion within this environment, with her film Dance Girl Dance, which features two women struggling to make a name for themselves in show business. Contemporary film critics praise it for its interesting take through a feminist perspective.
This enforced establishment only furthered the development of gender roles and gender schemas within the film industry. You weren't allowed to talk about sensitive topics, and you couldn't discuss whether or not women should be allowed to have the same jobs as men, or if men should be allowed to do the labor that women normally did. The Hays Code was eventually unable to be upheld everywhere towards the end of the 1950s, and as such it was abandoned in favor of the MPAA rating system, which you would recognize as this.
Today, society moves further and further towards a progressive stance on gender equality, and the pre-established gender schemas within the film industry are being broken down. Francis Ford Coppola, who directed classics like the Godfather series, The Outsiders, and Apocalypse Now, has a daughter named Sofia Coppola. She's responsible for directing Lost in Translation, which is a movie that features a dominant male role played by Bill Murray, which ironically has him as a lonely and unfulfilled actor, who is then saved by the compassionate relationship between himself and Scarlett Johansson. Wonder Woman was directed by Patty Jenkins, and it was actually her big domestic opening into the film world, about a woman who is symbolized as the growth of the power of women in contemporary society as a warrior of an all-female race.
Popular satire flick American Psycho was directed by Mary Herron, and while it was written by a male, Herron's take portrays Patrick Bateman as a cold psychopathic killer, while putting his less fortunate female victims in a much more humanized light. In the end, he can't bring himself to off his own secretary, a gendered role attributed to females. Arain breaks commonality in movies by portraying the male figures as vain and wicked, and turned the tables in this satirical murder film. It is in the modern society that we see the concept of gender schemas and gender roles being turned on its head, and the film industry is no different, as more and more female directors are garnering praise for their works that speak of the plight of women in society today through compelling narratives. We see the psychological concepts that are taught to us, exhibited, and riddled throughout the history of filmmaking. And as an observer, it's easy to sit back, relax, and enjoy the film of life. But I implore us to all be the directors of our own stories, regardless of the gender schemas. And as always, thanks for watching.